See you all.
Lindsay, how we doing?
We were there, but we're all set.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome to all the council members and others from the general public who are participating. And we'll call to order the council meeting for September 13th of 2022. The purpose to take up a professional regulation issue. That's right now the only matter on the agenda for today. But let me first ask if there are any additions or deletions to the agenda as posted. Hearing none, we'll assume there are no changes, and the only matter for our consideration today will be to take up a professional regulation matter. What we envision is hearing, excuse me, a description of a proposed stipulated agreement that will, if approved, not require us to conduct a so-called contested hearing with live witnesses and such. I think what we will hear, it's been distributed to the council, is that there's been that the individual who's the subject of today's proceeding, represented by council, that there was a negotiated resolution of this matter. We'll go through and hear a recitation of the facts that it's believed would be presented if this were a contested hearing. Council members will be able to ask questions about those facts of what the evidence it's believed would be if this was a contested hearing. And then we will have a discussion. It's legally appropriate for the council to go into executive session if it wishes to discuss the matter further. But if that happens and we go into executive session, I think there'll be a link that will be provided, a separate link for council members to use to get into discussion in executive session. In any event, whether there's an executive session or not for internal discussion purposes of the evidence or aspects of this matter, we will come back into open session on this link, I believe, and there will be consideration of whether to approve the negotiated stipulated agreement or to reject it. And if it's rejected, should we get to that point and get that result, there will either then be rescheduled a contested hearing or perhaps some other attempt to resolve the matter without a contested hearing. But we do have a negotiated stipulated resolution of the matter, and that's what we're prepared to hear about right now. So before I turn it over to Jacob Humbert from the AG's office, who's been working on this matter, want council members to know that Attorney Wesley Lawrence is on the meeting, and he's been under contract and is under contract to the council to provide legal advice to us, and we'll take advantage of that depending on how that this goes. But he's participating in the meeting today. Any questions or comments before we proceed to hearing a description of the stipulated agreement? Hearing none, then Jacob Humbert, please take us through the provisions of the stipulated agreement.
I'm sorry. I do have one issue that I
Oh,
wanted
okay.
to raise.
All right.
This is Erin Jacobson from the Attorney General's office. It took me a moment to get my mic to unmute. I did just want to acknowledge one aspect. This is a procedural aspect, based on the fact that Attorney Humbert is the administrative prosecuting attorney for this proceeding, and he is also an assistant attorney general. I myself am also an assistant attorney general. So I just wanted to raise the issue and then also assure this body that Attorney Humbert and I have had absolutely no communications about this issue. We haven't spoken once about these proceedings or about Officer Trybulski's case. We do not share files. I do not have access to his files. He does not have access to my files. And when it comes to the business of the council, contested or not, I report solely to General Young. I do not in any way report to the administrative law director, Attorney Humbert. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and so that we all know that, from my perspective, and I will not speak for Attorney Humbert, but I am completely able to be impartial, and I don't believe there's any fairness issues here or any conflicts.
Thank you for that, Erin. And I should have said, I was remiss in not saying earlier that Officer or Mr. Trybulski has received notice of the fact that we are going to have this meeting of the council to take up the issue of the stipulated agreement today. I don't know whether he's on the line, but he knows that we're taking up this matter today.
Great, thank you.
All right. With that, Jacob, can you please take us through the proposed stipulated agreement?
Good morning, Chair Sorrell. Good morning, members of the council. Just a preliminary question to your point. I don't know whether Mr. Trybulski is on the meeting. If he is, I would request that he let us know. It appears that he is not. This, as Chair Sorrell indicates, this matter is for the council related to a pending unprofessional conduct matter that was noticed for hearing today. The council members have a proposed stipulation and consent order before them for their consideration. If it is approved and issued, that would resolve the matter in lieu of a contested hearing. I would like to highlight one component of the council's statutes that may have some bearing procedurally on what will happen here today at the hearing, or excuse me, at the meeting. Under the council's statutes, particularly the statute related to accessibility and confidentiality, section 2409, it contemplates the confidentiality of information and records unless and until certain actions are taken under the circumstances concerning unprofessional conduct cases, particularly section 2409, subsection D, that speaks to council and hearing officer and council staff obligations to keep confidential information regarding unprofessional conduct, complaints, investigations, proceedings, and related records, except the information required or permitted to be released under this section. There are fairly limited circumstances in which information can be disclosed. And in this circumstance, there has been a notice of hearing issued for this matter. That is a public record. It identifies the allegations. It identifies the particular sources of authority that are implicated here. As the council is aware, that particular notice of hearing alleged a particular circumstance occurring on February 4th, 2021, where Mr. Trybalski is alleged to have conducted a motor vehicle stop, and the allegations are that that motor vehicle stop was conducted without reasonable suspicion or probable cause, and also involved a request and the securing of voluntary consent from the operator of such a vehicle, despite no reasonable suspicion or probable cause to believe that there were any circumstances that involve potential criminal activity. As a result, as explained in the notice of hearing, that conduct was such that the state would intend, if we'd gone to hearing, would have sought to prove 3 violations of 3 Williston Police Department policies. Violation of such policies, as expressed in the notice of hearing, would amount to violations of the unprofessional conduct statute, and would amount to Category B conduct as defined in the statute. However, in terms of the particular stipulation, I don't believe that I would be at liberty to speak to the particulars of the stipulation and consent order, given the limitations set forth in section 2409D. It appears from the statute that until there is a stipulation that would be ultimately approved by the council, that stipulation would remain a confidential document, particularly subsection 2409C2 makes reference to what is included in the public register related to complaints, and it provides that information beyond the date and nature of the complaint and the summary of the completed investigation that is not attributed to a particular officer would remain confidential, and information beyond that would only be disclosed with respect to a complaint resulting in filing of charges or stipulations or the taking of disciplinary action. At that point, though additional information is made available under those circumstances. So I apologize. I was not aware that there would be a desire to have a presentation related to the stipulation itself. So I raised that issue of confidentiality, accessibility, and under the circumstances, I wouldn't be in a position to advise the council on those issues. Certainly Wesley Lawrence, as the attorney to the council, could speak to those issues and advise you on the potential limits in terms of what could be disclosed or described in public session related to this particular proposed stipulation and consent order.
Are you done, Jacob?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, it strikes me that this presents a difficult challenge for the council because and this being a public hearing, and presumably a member or members of the public who are interested in the matter listening in, and the fact that whatever action the council takes related to the stipulation is going to be done in public session. Certainly don't want to prejudice Mr. Trabolski's rights in any way, but akin to a criminal court proceeding in which there is a negotiated settlement between the state and the respondent or defendant, a judge typically asks in open court, what would the evidence likely show if this matter went to trial? Judge wants to know that in order to make a decision on whether to agree with the proposed resolution. So my question or my desire is to have at least the fundamental basis for a determination of whether the results that are contemplated with the negotiated settlement are to be approved by the council, that there be at least some more basis for informed votes by council members on whether the resolution or negotiated resolution should be approved. So Attorney Lawrence, if the chair of the council starts to get into an area where rights are being prejudiced, please speak up. But my understanding of the facts of this incident back in February of 2021 was there was a call to the Williston Police Department by an individual reporting that a dark-skinned individual was knocking on, I think the person who made the call's door and wasn't leaving, and Williston Police responded. Officer Trabowski on another matter checked out of that matter and responded to the scene, and a car with an individual, not dark-skinned operator, was pulled over by Williston Police, and Officer Trabowski then engaged with the car that had already been stopped by another officer and proceeded to make inquiries about suspected drug activity, and there was a request for a consensual search of the vehicle, which was granted. And allegedly that intervention by Officer Trabowski was in violation of various Williston Police Department rules and regulations. Determination that, or a belief, I'd say, that his intervention, checking out of the other detail he was on, and what he did in connection with the stop of the vehicle was inappropriate, and consequently action was taken. And it's my understanding that Officer Trabowski is and for quite some time has not been employed by the Williston Police Department. If I've violated Officer Trabowski's rights in any way, my apologies to him and to the council. But my next question is, are there questions at this juncture that individual council members would like to be answered before there's a adequate comfort level to determine whether to approve the proposed resolution? With the proposed resolution, I might miss some of the key provisions, but that Mr. Trabowski permanently have his certification as a law enforcement officer revoked, and that should he seek, and that he would not seek to be a law enforcement officer in Vermont forever. I believe that a record of this revocation of his law enforcement license will be filed with a national data bank. I believe that to be the case. And under the terms of the proposed resolution or settlement, that if he seeks employment by a Vermont law enforcement agency, not for a position that requires certification as a Vermont law enforcement officer, but for example, applied to be a records clerk or a dispatcher or the like with a Vermont law enforcement agency, that he would be required to submit through that application process, if it was to happen, a letter notice of this matter and the stipulated agreement. Let me ask Wesley Lawrence if I have misstated anything thus far. Or let me ask Chris Burkell, our Deputy Executive Director, who's intimately familiar with this matter, if there's any misstatement by me. Certainly not intentional, but inadvertent.
No concerns, Chair. You've adequately outlined the circumstances here.
Thank you. Any questions on the part of council members relating to any of these matters? Yes, Evan Meenan.
Thanks, Bill. I do have some questions and some concerns about the way in which the underlying incident was summarized in the stipulation. Those questions and concerns might be more appropriate for the deliberation portion of our proceeding, but I flag that now just to let the rest of the council members know that I'm not prepared at this point to vote one way or another based on the information presently available to me.
And the reason you're not posing those question or those questions now is because of Jacob's concerns about violating confidentiality issues.
No, I don't. I just pulled up the statute related to confidentiality, and I don't think that my questions would violate that statute. And I'm happy to raise them now, and we can discuss them in deliberations, just so that the rest of the council members and the public know what my concern is. But the definition of Category B conduct requires a finding of a willful failure to comply with the state required law and policy. And the proposed stipulation flags that the applicable section of the statute that defines Category B conduct is biased enforcement. But paragraph 7 of the proposed stipulation does not indicate that former officer Trybolski conducted the traffic stop as a result of biased enforcement. There's no reference to the demographics or other relevant considerations in the stipulation itself. So my concern is my understanding is these stipulations become public, and without that additional information in the stipulation, would someone conclude that any time it's determined that a stop was not based on reasonable suspicion, that this council might revoke the officer's certification? It sounds like, based on your summary, Bill, that the conduct at issue here was much more severe than that, but none of those facts are reflected in the stipulation itself.
Jacob, do you want to respond to Evan's question or concerns?
Only to the extent that the state would certainly intend, if this does go to hearing, to prove that the various elements required for a Category B misconduct finding would be proved under the circumstances. To the extent that there are issues to be resolved in the stipulation, that would have to be resolved through further negotiations with Mr. Trybulski moving forward.
Evan, you have any response or further questions at this juncture?
I suppose my only comment would be that I certainly understand that, and that, you know, but at the same time, if the council is going to make these stipulations available to the public, and people may or may not be citing these stipulations as some type of persuasive authority in future proceedings, 5-10 years from now, if someone is reading this, those additional facts that would enforcement based on someone's demographics are just not summarized in this stipulation. I don't necessarily doubt that those facts are true. I just think that it would be better if they were summarized in the stipulation.
I'll just say personally that I had a similar reaction to my review of the stipulation. Other questions, concerns on the part of the council?
Jared, during your discussion here, you mentioned that the vehicle had been stopped prior. Is that true? Prior to?
My understanding is the vehicle was stopped by another Colchester officer, presumably the one who got the initial call to respond to the location the call came from, of the dark-skinned individual knocking on a door and not leaving. That Mr. Trybulski, who was on another call, checked off that call and responded to the dispatch that went to the other officer, and he came upon the vehicle that had been stopped by another Williston officer, and then proceeded to take the actions that resulted in the disciplinary action by Williston and the complaint of professional misconduct to us.
I would think that would be an important part in the stipulation, because the way I read it, he was told by an officer that the Dodge Charger was a vehicle coming from that residence based on the tracks, not because it had been stopped prior.
I read something about that there was snow on the ground, and the tire tread somewhat resembled the tracks that this other officer had seen in the snow. I think that's fact.
No, I agree with that. It just doesn't say that the vehicle had been stopped prior.
I don't think this vehicle was stopped another time. I think it was just, unless I'm mistaken, it was stopped by another officer, and then now Mr. Trybulski came upon the vehicle that had already been stopped. I think that's what happened.
Okay.
Other council members have questions? Hearing or seeing none. Next question is, does the council wish to go into executive session to discuss this matter before coming back into public session to approve or reject the stipulated agreement.
Make a motion to enter executive session with members of the council, and I'll accept any recommendation from Wesley, but our legal counsel and any other appropriate individuals.
It would be council members, academy staff, and Wesley Lawrence. And my assumption is that Aaron Jacobson from the AG's office would participate in the executive session, but that Jacob Humbert would not.
I'll second the motion.
It's moved and seconded that we close this portion of this public session and go into a separate executive session. I think there'll be a new link sent if this motion is approved. My assumption, Lindsay, is that this link would remain open for those not going into the executive session, and that we would come back to this link if and when we go back into public session.
That is correct. And I just sent the executive session link to everyone.
Is there discussion on the motion that has been moved and seconded that we move into an executive session to discuss the matter that we've been discussing thus far?
Yeah, Attorney General, this is Chris Herrick. And I may
I'm
be
no
wrong.
longer Attorney General, Chris, but
Okay.
I was
I
once,
know. Old
for
habits
almost
die
20
hard.
years.
I may be wrong, and there's enough lawyers on this call to correct me, but I believe under public meeting law, when you go into executive session, you're supposed to state the reason for going into executive session.
I believe the reason,
It could be
Is
just
to-
for a personnel matter. Or
well,
something.
it's a personnel matter, but also so as not to violate due process rights on the part of Mr. Trabowski, should the stipulated agreement be rejected by the council and we move to at some future date to a contested hearing.
Perfect.
Any other questions or comments before we vote on the standing motion to go into executive session? And I should say for the record that the members of the Professional Regulations Subcommittee who are council members, they also will not be going into the executive session, and consequently, they need not vote on the issue of going into the executive session. So with that, we'll call the question, and all of those able to vote who wish us to go into executive session, please say aye or raise a hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we will temporarily, for I don't know how long, adjourn via another link that's just been sent to us to executive session. And when that executive session of whatever length is completed, we will come back into this link to resume the public section. With that, all those coming into the executive session can free to leave here now. Lindsay, are we back on?
We are back on.
All right, we have conducted an interesting discussion in executive session. We've completed our discussions in executive session or back in open session. And the matter for the council is whether to accept or to reject the negotiated resolution of Mr. Trabulski's case that would call for him to permanently be barred from working as a certified law enforcement officer in the state of Vermont. And there are other restrictions as set forth in the negotiated resolution. And so let me ask the council members if there is a motion regarding the matter of approval of the negotiated settlement for our consideration. Brian, you were muted, so if you made a motion, we didn't hear it.
Yes, I move that the council approve the stipulation and consent order as presented.
It's been moved to approve the consent order as presented. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Lindsay,
Glenn
did you
Boyd.
catch who that is seconding?
Glenn Boyd.
Glenn Boyd. It's moved by Brian Cyril, seconded by Glenn Boyd, that the council approve the resolution as presented. We will, and again, the members of the Professional Regulation Subcommittee are not, are able to be present for this open session, but not to vote. We'll look for a voice vote and show of hands, but to the extent that there's any question about votes submitted, we'll do a roll call vote. Any discussion on the motion? All right, then all those in favor of the motion to approve the negotiated settlement, please say aye or raise a hand.
Aye.
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 Opposition? All right, there is at least one vote in opposition. So Lindsay, would you please call the roll?
Yes, for voting members, Mark Anderson,
Yes.
Glenn Boyd,
Aye, yes.
Cassie Berdisha,
Aye.
Chris Loris,
Aye, yes.
Jay Green,
Aye, on behalf of EDRE Susanna Davis.
Chris Herrick,
Aye.
Aaron Hodges,
Yes.
Aaron Jacobson,
Yes.
Kevin Lane,
Yes.
Evan Meenan.
You're muted, Evan.
My apologies. My vote is no, and when the time is appropriate, I'd like the opportunity to explain why, please.
All council members will have an opportunity to explain their vote if they so desire after we've taken the roll here.
Mike Major,
Aye.
Tom Mosier,
Aye.
Sadie Donovan,
Yes.
and Brian Searles.
Yes,
That completes the roll for voting members. The majority were yes.
Right. Evan has indicated a desire to speak to the reasons for his vote, and then other council members will have the opportunity, if they so wish, to explain why they voted as they did.
Thank you, Bill. I wanted to explain on the record that my vote of no was simply a vote not to approve this stipulation. It was not a vote that should be interpreted as me concluding that former Officer Trybulski did not engage in Category B conduct, and it should not be interpreted as a vote that a revocation of an officer's license would not be appropriate in response to the commission of a second act of Category B misconduct. The reason why I voted no was simply because I do not think that the facts as outlined in paragraphs 4 through 7 of the proposed stipulation lay a sufficient factual basis to enable me to conclude that former Officer Trybulski willfully failed to comply with the applicable policies referenced in the stipulation, including the department's fair and impartial policing policy. It sounds as though such facts exist and would enable me to vote yes in favor of a finding of Category B misconduct, but those facts have not been included in the stipulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members, including who wish to explain why they voted as they did, and members of the professional regulation committee are able to address the council if any one or ones of them wish to do so. Any other council members who wish to explain a vote or address the issues that have been before us? Hearing none, let me say that this was the first time we've had this council, which has been in effect since January 1 of 21, has had the opportunity to have a discussion like this on a matter involving the livelihood of a Vermont law enforcement officer, or in this case, a former Vermont law enforcement officer. But I'm impressed by and pleased by the seriousness with which the council has taken up this particular issue, but has also, discussed questions about this process and wanting us to make sure to dot our I's and cross our T's and affording due process, but in taking allegations of professional misconduct against Vermont law enforcement very, very seriously. And in my view, that has happened in this case. Mr. Trybulski will not wear a badge of Vermont law enforcement for the rest of his working life. And the allegations and what I understand to be the underlying facts behind this prompted Williston Police Department to sever ties with Mr. Trybulski, and consequently this council has upheld the recommendation from our professional regulation subcommittee that the action taken today, given the facts and the history, are warranted. So my thanks to all of you for your participation, your serious participation and involvement this morning. Let me turn to our executive director, Heather Simons, and just ask Heather, is there anything more? We didn't add anything to the agenda, but do you or Chris Burkell have anything to offer at this time before we accept a motion to adjourn?
No, thank you, Bill. I think you said it all. I appreciate the council's time and the thoughtfulness everyone put into this, that the professional subcommittee members, all of the attorneys, and certainly the staff. It's taken a long time to get this put together. And I know everyone that we've worked with has taken this very seriously.
And Heather, will the will you be releasing something to the press to indicate the action taken? I know we've got media on the call here, but issue generally a press release advising the what you're able to put out publicly about this matter and the decision of the council.
That's right.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, knowing that our regular monthly council meeting is,
21st,
I'm sorry,
the 21st.
21st. Right. So is there a motion to adjourn until we reconvene on the 21st?
I would make a motion to end this hearing.
The motion is made to adjourn this hearing of the council. Is there a second?
Second that.
It's moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye or raise a hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposition? Adjournment passes. Thank you for everything today. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
I go.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.